Welcome to Adventures in Life. I'm Earl Beecher, your host. Because of the budget cuts, some of our schools have eliminated or greatly reduced the coursework in art and music. They are almost cutting culture out of the curriculum for our children. This is a great loss to our society and especially to our children. They're missing some of the richest experiences that we could offer them in our culture. This was brought out very clearly in a recent movie, namely Mr. Holland's Opus, in a scene where Mr. Holland was talking to the school administrator, and the administrator said, well, because of the budget, we have to cut music out of the curriculum. We're going to concentrate on reading, writing, and mathematical skills. And Mr. Holland responded, yes, and what are they going to read and write about? The point was beautifully made. Today, I would like to present a very different show for you. I've interviewed guests from many walks of life, as most of you know. I've talked to business people, educators, psychiatrists, nuclear scientists, health practitioners, inventors, lawyers, musicians, psychics, and so forth. But today, I'm going to interview an artist. It's a very different interview because he's a dear friend who passed away several years ago. And he's not here. As you can see, the chair is empty. And yet he will be here with us, in a way, as you will soon see. His name is Vernon Kerr, and he clearly is one of Laguna Beach's brightest shining stars. He maintained a gallery there for over 10 years, and he participated in the Festival of the Arts 8 years. Now, stepping into Vernon Kerr's studio is like breezing through the many moods of nature. Although he's most famous for his seascapes, he was inspired by a wide range of subject matter. You can feel the warmth of the setting sun on a wood-strewn stream shoreline, or the coolness of snow on a remote mountainside in his paintings. And one of his trademarks were seagulls soaring in the sunset or searching through the tidal pools. At the age of 15, Vernon began his career with a 4-year apprenticeship to Leon Franks. Vernon lived in Downey, and it was a 2-hour bus ride to Hollywood to take lessons twice a week. And also, at least once a week, he would go to Laguna Beach, where he could study the rocks and the sea. Later on, Leon was to become one of the most renowned of Laguna Beach's artists. He's best known for his still lifes. And there are 4 books that Leon did for the Walter Foster Company, and I have them here. You can see Leon's book on still lifes, on techniques, on fruits and vegetables, again with the still life present, and finally on clowns and portraits. Leon was one of the renowned ones. Vernon studied with him and learned all of his techniques. And so Vernon confided into me, he said, Leon is so well known for his still lifes and his florals, I had to learn how to paint seascapes in order not to be forever in Leon's shadow. As you will see later in the show, or as you've seen some of the florals that were used on some of the album jackets, you've seen the paintings there. There were florals and seascapes on some of the album jackets that Vernon did for the Paul Smith albums. When Vernon was 17 years old, his first one-man show was sponsored by the Junior Women's Club at the library in Southgate, California. He displayed about 24 paintings at that show. At age 19, he joined the Navy and was assigned to be the draftsman illustrator on a repair ship. And during his tour in Japan, he rented a little studio on the land. And the ship's captain didn't mind if Vernon went onto the land as long as he was on board ship from 7 until 4 each day. And Vernon took advantage of this time to travel in the Orient and to study the art shows that were there and the Oriental techniques. Later he explained, I think that's why my work is different. Oriental work is different. It's clean and efficient. Their colors are pure. Their stroking is simple. I draw my paintings in an Oriental style. It uses economy of strokes. There is no experimenting on the canvas. And years later, when he was teaching his art classes, as an exercise in discipline, he would paint a Leon Frank's Dream Rose in 10 strokes or less, then challenge his students to do the same. It was exciting to watch him execute exercises such as these. It was while he was in the Navy that his family moved to Laguna Beach, and his mother established a gift shop art gallery there. She sold his paintings as he sent them home to her. It became a very good partnership. In fact, the Key Arts Gallery, located in the very center of town, became one of the well-known established landmarks. The International Art Company produced his first prints and distributed them worldwide when Vernon was only 24 years old. This became a pattern that soon spread throughout the art printing world. In fact, this has spread so much that Vernon is probably now one of the most reproduced American artists there is. His prints are available from International Art, from Texas Art, Donald Art, Brentwood Fine Arts, and Haddad Fine Arts Publishing, which is the largest publisher of prints in the world. And Haddad is in Anaheim, California, and they have more of Vernon's paintings in print than any other artist except Van Gogh or Russell. Speaking of Van Gogh, the parallels in the lives of Vincent van Gogh and Vernon Kerr are surprising. I won't spend time going into it right now because that would be a whole show in itself. But probably the most important thing is that they both studied Oriental art. It gave a flavor to their painting, and unfortunately they both died at a very early age. Van Gogh was 37, Vernon was 44. In addition to the beautiful art prints, Vernon is famous. He was featured on three of the books that were put out by the Walter Foster Art Company. Now, these books are famous. I talked to Mr. Foster one day, and I did an interview with him. And he said that their books were sold over 3 million copies in 100 countries around the world, and that the Vernon Kerr books were among the best-selling books in their whole catalog. Among these with Vernon Kerr, there's one in particular that I wanted to call attention to. It's paintings of seascapes by 20 of the world's most famous artists. And at the time that I interviewed Mr. Foster, it was a short while later that I did an interview with Bill Yelland, who owned the famous Yelland Galleries, including the one at the Disneyland Hotel. And Mr. Yelland said something that I thought was very significant. He made a comparison between Vernon Kerr and Frederick Waugh. He said, "I predict that Vernon Kerr will go down in history as the greatest seascape artist of the 20th century, even as Frederick Waugh is now being recognized as the greatest seascape artist of the 19th century." It's interesting, they're both on a page that opens together in one of the Walter Foster books. The paintings that you saw earlier that were used on record album jackets received special notice in Billboard, Cashbox, and one of them, the one with the little tree in the middle of the field, was actually reproduced in full on the cover of Airwaves magazine. I had never seen that kind of publicity come to a record album before, where they were reproducing the cover on the cover of magazines. Vernon finished his career at Laguna Beach with a very special painting. It's the one that you saw at the very opening of the show. The credits ran over it. When he first showed it to me, he said, "Earl, I made this up in my mind. This is an ideal ocean. It's a monographic type of painting, very hard to do." And he said, it was a peaceful place. He said, "It's a religious painting. Can you figure it out?" And I looked at him and I said, "No, what is it?" He said, "Think about it." I entitled it Encounter. Vernon in 1969 moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. He wished to paint landscapes. He said, "I'm famous for seascapes. I want to be known for landscapes." And I commented on it later with him, and I said, "Vernon, your snow scenes are gorgeous. How come you can paint the snow so well?" And his comment was, "Well, it's only water. Light reflects off it in the same old red, yellow, and blue." 5 years later, he returned to California because he found that that special ocean that he had created in his mind actually existed. He called me up on the phone. He said, "Earl," he said, "encounter really exists in nature. I'm moving to Mendocino." It was that same year that Vernon gave a one-man show at an art gallery sponsored by the classical radio station in town, KFAC. I'm sure many of you fondly remember it. This is a way that music ties with art so closely in the cultural inheritance that we have for our children. Vernon made the statement that he did most of his paintings to music. It makes nice strokes, he said. And so the station challenged him. They said, "We will pick 12 pieces of music, and we want you to paint 12 seascapes to this music." And he did. And there were pieces like Toccata and Fugue by Bach, Wellington's Victory by Beethoven, the theme from the calendar Prince from Scheherazade, the Dance of the Seven Veils by Strauss from Salome, and The Creation of the World by Vivaldi. And when it came time for the showing, Vernon and I went in and hung all the paintings in the gallery without putting any names on them. And then we challenged Mr. Princey, Carl Princey, who was the program director, and said, "Come down and see if you can tell us which painting is which." And to the credit of Mr. Princey, he identified every single one of them correctly. I said, "That's quite a compliment that you could do that." He said, "No, it's more of a compliment to the artist that he caught the spirit of the music enough that I could tell which one was which." Now, I would like to pause for a public service announcement, and then I have a very special treat for you. We're going to have Vernon Kerr paint a painting on camera.
For free information on how you can help conserve our songbirds, write Songbirds, Washington, D.C. 20240.
At the beginning of the show, I promised you that Vernon Kerr would be here in person, in a way. Well, let me explain. In 1976, KOCE-TV in Huntington Beach, Channel 50, produced a special called Showcase on Vernon Kerr, on which he painted a painting on camera. And it's through special permission of the producer of that showcase, namely Mr. Kent Johnson, that I'm able to show you Vernon demonstrating his painting technique in person.
Usually I have a black and white sketch, and at this moment I have a color sketch. Let me show you how I go about this.
Okay.
Usually I start with a turpentine wash, which is a very easy way to go about it, because this establishes a very hard point of view when it comes down to an idea in your head, especially if you don't know what to do with yourself. It sounds like a big mismatch when you get done. Some of my favorite words, by the way, come out by this manner.
Do you usually start with the darker areas?
Usually, I just get this wash in here and we work out the colors. And out of it, it looks like a very large abstract painting when you get done. Sometimes it's very finished, sometimes it's very rough, very crude. But anyways, the mystery of it all comes out in the wash, I think. Painting seascapes is a very unusual situation because everything is moving. So your mind is moving very, very quickly.
How do you go about selecting the composition for your work?
Well, it depends upon your mood and your feelings of how you're getting up maybe in the morning, or maybe the very cloud formation that you see the very next day, or maybe the ocean itself is acting up. But normally I just work into it, and music is a favorite pastime of mine. I play it with my painting all the time. So, well, let me do this and I'll show you what I'm going to be doing on the bottom half here in about a second here. All right, now I'll get to the big sky. Big sky brush. Get all these colors around here. Good grays. Make a painting. It's called underpainting. It kind of gives a nice warm glow to the picture. As I am reaching my mood, I look down at my little painting down below here, and I check it for color and tone. I usually worked out all my preliminaries before this because you really just got to get this thing done. It's only a flashing second where things happen. You can see the way I'm working out these pinks here. Kind of go into a little blue, a little red. And just work it in there very quickly. I'm paying very close attention to the value coordination because when you're working outdoors, especially underneath the sun, you really have to paint a little bit darker than you really intended to, because every time you go in the home or your house, colors have a tendency to get washed out. Step back here a little bit, see what I'm doing here. Now I go to a foreground interest here to see, get me my momentum and my wave effect. This here's a nice spot. It's a little, very much of a light tone of color. Working out the grays. Painting's intriguing, isn't it, Gail?
It certainly is. Now, do you ever copy, let's say, a seascape, or are you primarily inventing all of these designs
No,
yourself?
I have a camera. I use the very modern methods of painting. I feel that we're given these things on Earth to do as a tool. I don't slavishly copy any photographic means, but I use it as a tool. It's like you use this...
As a reference, you
As
mean?
a reference, right. I make a lot of sketches. I make a lot of mental sketches. I'm driving down in a car, or maybe riding, maybe in an airplane, even looking at mountains sometimes, so tendency to give you a different outlook like when you're looking down on something. Visual impressions is what you're dealing with all the time. Seems like every time I'm turning around, I'm always mentally painting something. But
I understand that you sometimes paint to music, Vernon. Does that change the result?
oh, it does.
What does it do?
Give you nice strokes. Gives you a nice flow here. Just kind of slow up here. Kind of moves the momentum here.
Does it ever change your hues?
Colors have a tendency to give you different tones. Vibrant melodies will give you nice warm or orange tones, and very subdued or melancholy pictures. I should say pictures. Tones will give you melancholy tones. It's very related. These colors just have to be on there and worked in.
So your detail work comes later on?
Oh, I paint in 3 different stages. I work with my sketch. I'm working with my impastos right now to build up the textures. I let that dry, and then I come in for the final touches, and I put my highlights on, and I put a few glazes. And glazes are very thin washes of color laid on top of the original color to enhance the tone, to give it a luminosity. Paintings have a tendency to read at different intervals of light, and by working out 3 different stages, you're looking into the light of the painting, and it bounces back and gives a very nice luminous effect. It's like looking through a transparency, and the light bounces back and gives you the nice tone. I'll block this darky, and I'll show you how I pop these values out here. And I'll work out the little more of the detail of the wave here. Now here's where a nice bunch of tones will come out. Colors of white foam have many, many, many shades of red, yellow, and blue. So I work out a kind of a grayish, greeny tone. And then I work out a little pink here, because we're working with a very soft hue.
You never clean your brush as you go on to a lighter hue. You don't have to, I guess.
Well, I'm working from light to dark and from dark to light. And if I know what's on my brush, I can control the color. Because I'm working clear around the color wheel. But I do clean my brush quite a bit. Being that this is a sort of a demonstration and it's not taking too long, I'm going to try to slow up a little bit to give you what I really do. This is just a preliminary on my methods, just to give you an undertoning and painting. This is what I do when I'm starting. By this stage, Gail, I'm ready to build up the sections, each individual areas. I'll paint maybe a focused area here, and then maybe over here, and later on I'll work out the rock segment by itself. But in the meantime, let's me work on this wave area here to develop the shape a little bit better here. This seems to be the hardest part of the painting. It's always the hardest. It doesn't standing still, and what you're trying to do is get the momentum into it and give it this surge as it comes across the painting here, and yet contain it so it has something to look into.
Mm-hmm. Most of your paintings are very serene. Does that reflect your personality, Vernon?
Not necessarily. It's sort of maybe opposite of my personality. It kind of calms me down. But I have some unusual colors that I stick with, and maybe I'm going through my blue period or green period or whatever you call it. But I like certain colors. Right now I seem to be going from turquoise to orange.
After a painting has been completed, have you ever decided to go back and change the hue?
Sometimes I can just take the painting and throw it out and start a new one. Working out the details is probably the crucial point, because what you're trying to do is actually simplifying the details. Shape is what I'm trying to say here on this particular one here. Okay, we'll take a minute break here, and we'll go back and we'll finish it. Oh. Well, Gail, we're just about at the finish here. I had a few highlights here to see what will happen.
Vernon, is there a scale that you use for color as a pianist uses a scale?
Yes, we do have a tonal scale. I would say that this is probably in the key of C.
Okay.
Because basically we have a nice even bass area and a nice treble, and we're working now on the middle part right here.
Okay, well, paint a few bars for us.
We're painting a few bars, right. This seems to add to the luminosity of the colors. When the light hits this, of course, and when it's framed, it will take a completely different concept. This painting had a little tendency to dry now since I was working on it. And now it's just tacky enough where these highlights are being peeled off. The light's trickling down here. We're trying to figure out what the angle's going to be here. Yeah, we'll just give it a little, break up these areas here. And of course, you know what makes a painting valuable. We'll just put the signature on.
Of course. Are you pretty touchy about the frames that go on your paintings, Vernon?
Well, I'm very touchy, and I usually have a custom framer, and I try to measure out the picture according to the size of the picture. But anyways, let me get the signature on here. There you are.
Very nice.
Welcome back. By means of footage that's been provided to us through the facilities of KYOU at Rancho Santiago College, I'm going to give you another treat. We're going to spend the rest of the time watching some of the paintings that Vernon has done and listening to the music of Paul Smith until our time runs out. So thank you for being with us today on Adventures in Life. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.